Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to week 9 of EDCI. Fix that. 560 for the week, and tonight's topic is the last in our series of work with our projects, and we're going to work through the idea of creating a system for assessing process. So that's our task, but we're also going to think about why we'd want to do that and how it's going to fit with the rest of our project. So I hope you've had a chance to think through your largest kind of level thinking. You've mapped your content and you've mapped your assessment, and then you started thinking about some of your core skills. And when we start thinking about skills, we got to think about assessing things like process skills and some of those other things we'll talk about tonight. And to do that, we have to think about sophisticated ways to do assessment. So I hope tonight is useful in a lot of ways for just the purpose of your Canvas assignment, your project, but also the idea that you should be able to feel confident in your ability to create assessments for anything, any complex task. So let's move forward to the task. So probably at the beginning and the end, you probably want to look at this slide and just kind of go through these steps and think about creating your product. But so let's go through the creation process together. But in the end, you can do this with another person. So we've made the agreement that your product, your curriculum product, can be a collaborative effort. The other sections you need to do those on your own. So everybody needs to do their own goals and pedagogical creed and next level function, next level instruction. But if you want to work with another person on your product, then that's okay. So if you want to mix and match pieces, in fact, the thing you're going to create tonight might be something that a couple of you want to use. I could see some of the early childhood group people creating one task together, and I could see some of the secondary people doing that, and maybe some of the people we're working at in the SEL arena would probably want to potentially create something. So, but default position is create your own scale. So what are some of the things we'd call process? So when we're talking about assessing process, we're not talking about assessing. I mean, we can go to a product. If you just feel like a product is where you want to go, I guess what I would encourage you to do is think about all the different things that are things you care about: the quality, the investment, the effort, the process, attention, quality. So if we think about quality as the quality of a skill that's being performed, think, wow, how do you assess that? And that's kind of, again, when we feel like, oh, that's not a problem, and we'll talk about the example of something like figure skating. That's complicated. It's complicated. It's accessible, but anything that we can kind of conceive the qualities, then we can assess. So in your project, if you've got a major project or you got a ongoing assessment process, and some of you I'd probably want to check in with and kind of talk through that. For some of you, you've got I've heard you describe those kind of things, so I hope that you feel comfortable going down that road. Presentations, project-based learning, culminating tasks, small ongoing projects, daily task assessment, cooperative learning task. We could even go to a behavior chart or a process chart or a participation scale, a mindfulness chart. will work, a group reflection chart for any task. So again, these things are all topics, but again, you're going to want to make sure it's something that fits with what you do all the time. You know, it's for this project, but also what you do generally. So let's go back to our roadmap idea and think, why do I do this? Why would I choose to do something like assess process? And so if I've got a school, if I've got a classroom or a school that's relatively low functioning and teacher centered today, the nice thing about it is it really brings people from thinking about task completion as the goal and doing what the teacher wants, and helps people understand or operationalize, conceive the idea of quality. And so I get a lot more clarity in terms of the task. And a lot of students who are down here thinking, oh, I don't feel like working today and I don't care. And I'm not, you know, there's a lot of external locus control when we live down in this world. So when we do this, we build a lot of internal locus control. So if my school's already up here, if in this kind of two paradigm world, then the reason I would do this is because I want to have students go from thinking about doing it right to thinking about self-reflection, determining my own criteria for quality, reflecting on my level of quality, reflecting on how much process investment is going to get me more down this road of more self-directed, more toward excellence, and being a better student. And as a class, we get there collectively. So does that make sense? So there's a lot of reasons to think about doing this to bring my class upward in terms of the quality of the investment that's going on in my class. So again, so our task is to create a scale tonight, and we're going to build it piece by piece. And if you need help in terms of the reading, there's a reading that will be posted on Canvas. It's chapter 20 of Transformative Classroom Management, which wasn't in the book. It was just an appendix reading that's on the Transformative Classroom Management website, or it's on various places. So if you just put chapter 20 of assessing process into Google, it'll come up lots of different places. I think it's attached to the Canvas too. I'm pretty sure. If it's not, then let me know, and I'll make sure it is. Okay. So a real world way to think about this is the Olympic Games. So if we were in class, this would be a brainstorming question. But there are events in the Olympic Games that we can objectively measure. And then there are also events in the Olympic Games that require human interpretation. So you might just stop the tape and stop the video and the recording. I guess that's the word. Stop the recording and think about examples of objectively measurable events and events that require human interpretation. So maybe stop, think about that, come back. So what are those things that we can objectively measure? We can measure a race, or how far something went, or we can measure anything that is an absolute again, it's usually races, how far, how many balls go through a net, things like that. And then what are those things that require interpretation? Things like diving, gymnastics, figure skating, even boxing, and some of the skiing events and all sorts of things like that. So question is, why don't we just stick with events in the Olympics that we can objectively measure? Why don't we just have figure skaters race? Or why don't we have them just people race, or do the original events like a marathon and a dash and wrestling, and that's it? And why do we have all these other events, synchronized swimming and all these events, and different kinds of gymnastics and different kinds of diving and all sorts of freestyle events in the Winter Olympics? Why do we do those things? And different answers, but basically the idea is because we want to, right? Because we've chosen those events as meaningful events. So what's the analogy to our world as an educator? I guess the analogy would be that if we just grade things that we can count, worksheets, tests, how many they got right, things like that, then we're missing out on the ability to assess all these other things, their investment level, what they do, what they're trying to do, the process over time, complex products, complex outcomes, presentations, all sorts of things that we would want to assess. So that we care about, that we want them to care about, So if we don't assess those things, if we didn't have those Olympic events, nobody would really probably ever practice them. Maybe they would, but people aren't going to become as excellent if we don't assess them and put them in the games and call them an event. So if we don't assess process, we really can't count on our students investing the same degree as that if we do assess that process. Does that make sense? So it's a good analogy to think about, like, why do we assess? Why would we want to do this? And I guess the answer for us is, I can assess just about anything. Think about how complicated assessing figure skating is. If you just looked at it, for a person didn't know anything about figure skating and you saw people figure skating, you'd say, "Oh, we're going to put a number on that." You think, how could you possibly put a number on such a complex performance? But we do. So when we think about assessment, we want to make it sound, and so soundness has got certain qualities. So we look at that figure skating event and we go, look at a word like reliability. Do we get repeatable ratings over time? And if we look at 5 judges, the judges tend to have similar ratings for each group, even if it's slight differences, 7.2, 7.2, 7.1, 7.2. And then the next people come off the ice and it's 7.4, 7.3, 7.4. But there's still agreement, but the slightly different scores, but it's still agreement. So how do we get that kind of reliability among judges and among the same judge over time? And the answer is, you could say, it's really clear criteria, right? So that's got to be experienced as objective. So when we give a student a C on their paper, do they experience it necessarily as that is an objective score? So hopefully those figure skaters don't come off the ice and think, oh, that's purely how much they like me, or how much they just are favored, they like my country or something like that. They want to believe that it's in a very fair and objective measurement. So when we believe the assessment is very fair, objective, it's reliable, and then ultimately it's efficient, we can do it. You can have the figure skaters come off the ice and they get a score in about 2 minutes. And it didn't take us a week. We didn't have to look at the video over and over and over again. We could create a system where we could just watch it and give them a score. We have to train ourselves to do that. But and the last thing is, second last thing, let's show that next slide, that it's got to be there's got to be, if we want to call it sound, if we want to call the assessment system that we're using sound, it's got to have desirable consequences. It's got to encourage the kind of things that we want it to encourage. So just because it's a clear grade doesn't necessarily mean, or a clear or objective process doesn't necessarily mean it's encouraging the right thing. So what do we want it to encourage? And the ultimately last thing is, like figure skating, we got to ultimately give it a score. We don't always need to. We could give lots of other types of feedback, and we get them to self-reflect and all sorts of things. But if we can't ultimately give it a score, then our system has got some problems, because it just ends up being, we start losing these other things if we can't put a number on it. And even if, and we'll talk about this, even if I'm 4 years old, I'm still using a number is meaningful, because sometimes I have to be able to say 3 is not a 4. And working with really young students, they can still understand that a 3 is 3 and a 4 are different, and that what it takes to get a 4 is different from a 3, and we're not just talking about do better than you did yesterday. We're saying, well, you got a 3 today and let's get a 4 tomorrow, or you got a 4 today and you got a 3 yesterday. And so numbers make a difference, and the older we get, the more those numbers become meaningful in our lives, because they start turning into outcomes like grades and GPAs. So here's a class from some time ago that went through this process, and they thought of some of the things that they would say would be good consequences. And I'd say the bottom line to me is, does it give them feedback? Do they understand where they are? Do they know how to grow? Does it encourage them to do better? Is it ultimately motivational? Does it create a sense of quality? So, and as you look at your product that you're going to do, then this will be our test. Look at your list of what you'd like the desirable consequences to be of your assessment, and you can use that list to assess whether you think this is a good idea. And my guess is, if we went forward and backward in time, we could go to the end of the process and look at your scale and ask, does it do these things? And I think what you'd find is, it's going to do these things. It's going to help them know where they're going. It's going to help promote growth, internal locus control, all sorts of positive values. And then we look at the C at the top of the paper and we can say, does it do those things? And the answer is not very well. So we can't say that the C at the top of the paper or the worksheet does the same level of positive consequences as a high quality scale. So let's look at a few reasons why we would want to do this, and we could use the broad term for participation for process. So if I create a concept of quality, then my students care about the quality. If I never do, they tend to focus on completion. So unless I change their focus from completion to quality, then I tend to just deal with the same patterns over and over again. So we're creating a concept of quality that we can use in all areas. It's internalized. We want them to invest in the process. And when people invest in the process, products work out. When people invest in the product, we don't know what process they use necessarily. Sometimes they just throw it together at the last minute. And all of us can attest to that in our own lives. So if I'm assessing 100% own student behavior, like I do with process, everybody can invest in the process. Everybody can make an effort. Everybody can do this and this and this and this, and everybody can bring the stuff, and everybody can do those things. Not everybody can get 100% on the test, but everybody can try. And so when I assess those things, I get more internal locus control and I get more motivation. So I'm building that quality of trust, empowerment, agency, and internal locus control. And a really simple thing, last point, is that things I assess, I get more of. So, I mean, as a brand new teacher, I remember running into another teacher, and I used to assess, among other things like listening, and all my students listened all the time. And this teacher said, God, my students don't listen to me. And they say, it'd be so great if you could assess listening. And I thought, I assess listening and they do. And it was that simple in my mind at the time. And it really hasn't ever been not that simple. I did that for years and years and years. And I just didn't have that problem. And a lot of people are like, God, my students don't do this. They don't do this. They don't care about this. They don't work together. They don't. And that's a great place for you to be right now, is to think about all those things that annoy you about your students don't invest in their quality, and they don't care about this, and they don't work together, and they don't do a good job with their peer work, and they don't do a good job with their editing, and they don't do a good job with their collaborative groups. So if you think about those places where you say the students really don't do a good job of that, and I'd say, if you keep doing what you're doing and they've got that problem, you're going to have that problem until the end of the year. But if you start assessing the quality of something that you actually want, whatever they're not doing, then they're going to start doing that. And it's actually not that, it's kind of linear. And so the funny thing is 80 to 90% of teachers talk themselves out of doing the most obvious thing, which is building the skills that they want to see. They just find excuses and keep complaining about what the students can't do, as opposed to just going, okay, I'll just assess that, and then getting more of it. So to me, it's a mystery why we don't do that, and I can't explain it, but I know that the teachers who do think I could never not do this. As a teacher, I could never not assess process, because that's just took care of 90% of my problems, and built all sorts of positive qualities. So to not do that wouldn't have made any sense to me. So, or today, if I started teaching today. So why not do this? I guess if life is perfect, it isn't really that necessary. If everything is going perfectly and all your students are 100% motivated, then it's not really that necessary. Point number two is why not to do it is, if you give vague, if I go, oh, I'm just going to give some participation points, that's not what we're talking about. We're not saying give participation points or give extra points for people's effort in a subjective way. So when you do it in a subjective way, then it ultimately is just either useless or undermines that quality. This isn't a reward system. This is an evaluation of the person who walks off the figure skating ice. They don't go, oh, good job, you get 10 points for participation. They'd be like, we just trained for 4 years for you to tell us that we get points for participation. That's like, what? We would laugh, but we do that in the classroom, and somehow we think that's valuable. So anyway, and if you think back to your own experience, you didn't know what participation meant when someone goes, oh, 10% participation grade. So if that's where you are, then let's rethink that, please, and pull yourself out of that really narrow and I'd say unwise place. So if I'm trying to use it as something like trying to make students realize they're screwing up, and I'm trying to send the message of shaming to students, then I'm missing the point. It's about growth. It's not about trying to catch students screwing up. And if I'm using a colored card chart, then I'm using it backwards. And if you want a longer explanation, you can Google problems with colored card charts, and you can see why it's ultimately the negative reverse of what we're talking about tonight. Okay, so your job, kind of come up with a topic, you guys. So that might take us some time. So you probably are stopping this recording once in a while and thinking through it. So the key is come up with a topic. So again, some kind of skill, some kind of process. That list earlier that we were talking about, it's probably not a bad place to go. You just go to this list, look through some of these things and say, which one of those things really makes sense for my project? Hopefully you're doing lots of them lots of the time, but let's just do one for this project. So our first step is create a clear set of operational qualities of that thing you're talking about. So good peer editing, good group work, good project work, good lab work, whatever that thing is. So I'm going to create those qualities. You can borrow them from other people, but try to make them your own. And then we're going to create a scale we're going to drop those things into a scale. And then we're going to think about using that scale. So this is going to be your Canvas post again for this week. So you're going to create this and post it. Okay. So the first step, and again, this is probably where you've got a piece of paper out. I'd say a piece of paper is better than a computer right now. Computer's fine. If you just so wherever you brainstorm best, to brainstorm onto a piece of paper or brainstorm onto a computer screen. but you're just thinking about clumps of ideas and specifics. So, the student does this, 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 and I'm thinking about all these things. One thing that's going to really help you is to think about negative examples. So I think my students don't do this. So if they don't do this, then what's the thing I want them to do? They're always just going through the motions when they do their peer editing. I think that's not what I want. I want them to actually care and do this and take some care with it and be a good partner. So think about the things that bother you. The students come in and they don't listen to each other. The students come in and they don't try. The students come in and they don't show their work. The students come in and they don't really reflect on this thing that we're doing. The students come in and they don't have a way to think about their interactions with other people when they get in conflict. So what's the thing? So as opposed to the thing that is the problem that I think isn't going as well as I'd like, what's the thing what's the way I would say it looks like when it is going well? So that takes us some thinking. So we're coming up with all these ideas, and then ultimately we're going to put them in clumps. So that probably is going to take us some time, you guys. When we do this together, this is about a 25-minute activity. So I would give yourself some time to do this. This is not, the recording here is pretty linear, but this is where you're stopping and you're brainstorming. So I'm coming up with ideas. So I would come up with your ideas and then stop the recording now and come up with your ideas. Okay. So once I'm done, let's say my, and I'm going to keep massaging this and working with it and editing it. But let's just say that this person was trying to look at something general, like I want students to come in and have a good sense of what quality participation is. Every day I want them to be thinking about these. I could use this in any middle school classroom or elementary school classroom, or in a specials in high school, or even in high school. There's lots of different applications I could use for this, but I'm not suggesting this one so much. Again, look at that long list. So this is one of those things on that long list, just a kind of a daily, how am I doing? So when I looked at all those things I want, some of them were in the category of cooperation. Some of them were in the category of how I approach the work. Some of them in the category of effort and trying. So those are all different categories. I can do well in one and not so well in another. So the key is to have distinct categories, and I don't want to have 10, and I don't want to put them all in one great big vat if they're different. I couldn't put all these in one great big vat, because the problem is then I've got 3 different things, 3 flavors mixed together all the time. And I can't ever pull the flavors apart if they're all mixed together all the time. So the only way to have them, I can have them together, but I can mix them once, but I can't mix them at the beginning because I can never pull them apart again. So I've got to be able to have distinct qualities, and then I've got to be able to say, okay, given these distinct qualities, how did I do on those distinct qualities? And if I've got things to this point, so again, is it about your lab work, or is it about the social emotional reflection process, or is it about your mindfulness work, or is it, what's the thing that you're doing, or is it just about, again, peer editing process, or peer feedback process, or cooperative learning groups, or whatever the thing is that you've come up with. You are, and music teachers, this could, to me, I would have a general, when we walk in, here's what we do. And having qualities outlined, and large outline ideas, specifics, and then ultimately a system for both self-reflection and for grading it when you want to grade it. So anybody who's doing anything where they've got students who are coming into them group after group after group, if you don't have this, it's almost like you're teaching with one arm behind your back. It's really, or teaching, with a huge handicap. Having it, you've got so much more capability. And if that doesn't make sense, then I guess I'd say try it for a year, and then it'll make tons of sense. You'll feel like you couldn't teach without it. Okay, so I take so that's where I've got to get. And once I've got that, I'm in good shape. So again, probably you're going to need to stop the recording and get to the point where you have something that looks like this. You have verbiage, you have VATs with labels, you have verbiage for those labels. And if you've got that, then we're in good shape. So the next point is, so let's think about some of the ways we want to word this. So there's no point in using negative words. So we're only using positive words. We're using as concrete of words as possible. So as much as possible, we're saying, can I observe that behavior? So, these things aren't necessarily obvious or perfectly observable, but I can say they look for ways to solve and they don't blame or quit. I can walk up and I go, that either happened or didn't, and it's not completely invisible. It's not entirely in someone's mind. I can see someone changing their attitude that way. Or I can see people working hard consistently throughout the period. Things are going well and they're not through work hard with God's institution. And so consistently would be in my top level. So again, those are things that I can say, was it consistent? So those are some of the descriptors we're trying to get as concrete as possible. So and let's avoid a lot of modifier language. So always, sometimes, never, seldom. Let's avoid that in modifier language. There really are two levels of behavior. Things that are happening consistently. Well, I'd say three. Things that are happening consistently, things that are happening inconsistently, and then things that are happening zero. And we can understand those three levels. So I drive around and I've never gotten in a ticket. And you could say, gosh, you've never gotten a ticket. Or I could say, I drive around and once in a while I have some traffic problems. So I'm not perfect. I'm not in the perfect category anymore. Now I'm in the sometimes category. Or I could say, I drive around and all the time, or I don't know how to drive. That's another category. So I don't drive, I drive and there's problems, or I drive perfectly. Those are three distinctions that we can say, yeah, absolutely. We could all agree on those distinctions, but we can't all agree on always, sometimes, seldom, and never. So when you see a scale that has those words that are modifying, then I would say it's crap and make your own and don't use it, or just start over. You can use some of the ideas, but when you see a scale like that, it's made by a person who just wasn't thinking. So if it was you, forgive yourself and make a better scale. So in terms of scale options, and we'll just take a little bit of time with this, we can create checklists. So things that we can say, did it happen or not? Yes, no, didn't happen, did happen. But the problem is not many events happen in checklist format. So if I say, I'm going to get my oil changed, I want to see, did they do it or not? Yes, no, yes, 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 they did all these things. And that's all I care about. I don't really care about the quality of what they did when they put in new windshield wiper fluid. There's not really a quality issue. But now if I think about almost any other quality of my students are working together, it's not something that they're working together or they're not working together. There are infinite levels of how well they're working together or not. So ultimately there's this level of beautiful, wonderful, and then there's this level of war and terrible. And on a scale of 1 to 50, we could make 49 levels, but we're going to choose a few levels, maybe 4 or maybe 3. And when we think about that, again, we've got a really linear way to think about it, saying, oh, did they do all the things we wanted, or some of the things we wanted, or a few of the things we wanted? We could also say some desired things, not any desired things, or all desired things, not undesired things, some desired, some undesired, a little desired and mostly undesirable. We could do that, but the problem is then you got to ask yourself, when you do that, you've kind of added a lot of complexity to your scale that ends up being, why would you need the negative? And what I'd say is, try it without any of the negative, just defining the minimal, a little bit better, and then everything at the top, and maybe 4 levels again. So that's structurally, those are all options, but I guess I'd say there are better options, and I think this last one is the best option. This one is the best of all these ways of approaching creating your scale. So again, we're taking that information that we had and we're putting it into, so if I've got my 3 different traits, then now I can just kind of drop my data, draw my information and draw my specifics in. So at the top level, I'm basically going to say everything. I'm going to describe everything. And then for trait A, everything for trait B, and everything for trait C. And then I'm going to drop down and I'm going to put less in for each one. So let's look at the examples in a second. In terms of the amount of point value, so let's say I'm giving a presentation. And again, this is kind of an activity we would have done, but let's just think about a presentation. What are the various qualities of a presentation? And the first question is, could a person, well, first question is, what are their different traits? And maybe we'll say, well, we want it to be organized. We want the content to be good. We want the delivery to be good. We want there to be visuals. So now that we've kind of figured out what our different areas are, we could say, well, is it possible for a person to do well in one area and not in another? And the answer is, yeah. So what's the problem if we try to put everything into one scale? And if you haven't thought about this before, the problem is that if I've got low scores on one area, then that means I'm going to get low scores on everything, because that's my definition, right? So you really want to be able to pull things apart and create the ability to give different point values for different areas. And then as this person, there was a volunteer who came up with these numbers. So they decided that the organization was worth 5, delivery was worth 5, visuals were worth 5, but the content was worth 10. So we could say the content was worth 20 or 30 or whatever. We could put any numbers on any of these things. So we're not stuck with giving everything the same value. We can always give relative importance to things. So when we give a 10, what's the next level? I mean, we could say a few fewer points, so maybe 6, and for the lower points would be 3. So 5, 3, 1 is kind of typical for if we have 5 points in that area. Does that make sense? So again, you look at your numbers and just kind of create numbers that make sense, that are relatively important given what you want to emphasize. So again, we're not going to do this activity together, but a lot of people say things like, well, you can't grade listening, it's just too complicated. But here's a group of people in a class where I just ask them, so think about the things that we can all observe that if we wanted to grade listening, let's just say listening was one of our traits. We've got other traits too, let's say effort or preparation, or all sorts of things we could use, or all sorts of terms that we care about. But let's just say we do want them to be listening, and that's just something that we care about, and maybe that's an issue we've got, and we just think that's going to help us. So we've got different ways to talk about, we want them, let's say maybe that's taking notes, or it's that their eyes are up and they're attentive and their body is a certain way and they're asking questions and they're not talking and they're providing feedback, and maybe they're asking for clarification and all sorts of things. So that's our top level. So we're saying the top level is always everything we want from everybody who's doing everything, right? The next level is going to be a lot of things that we need, but it's not exceptional. So basically what we do is we take out a few things from that top level and we just kind of drop out. Maybe we take track speaker because that's kind of exceptional, and we take out ask clarifying questions, and we ask maybe those are the things that kind of distinguish the 3 level, but we still want them to be somewhat attentive and not rolling around on the floor, and we don't want them to be talking. So we want those things. And at the bottom level, we just need them to not be talking to other people, and we can just say they tried. So what's going to happen is we're going to have less words at each level as we go through this, because we're basically taking things out. So we're only talking about positive things, and positive did not talk to others is positive. So if I say didn't do something, that's positive. If I say I didn't break any windows in my home today, that's a positive. I didn't say, a negative would be you broke a window. Like, that's negative. But if I didn't break any windows, that's a positive. I tried not to break any windows and I didn't break any windows. That was a positive effort. So it's a negative thing, but it's stated as a positive effort, and it is a positive thing. There's a lot of positive things that we didn't do every day, and we try not to do those things, and we didn't do them. So they're still positives, but they're things that we don't want to have happen, like someone turning their neighbor and talking the whole time, and that's not listening. So, and we need a level 0, by the way. In actuality, we need to put a 0 on these things because because if we don't have a 0, then we don't have a theoretical place for people who basically don't do anything. So if I show up and I make a complete mess, that's not trying enough. And again, if I come in and I'm just belligerent, and hopefully our level 0 reflects a hypothetical reality, but it does reflect a possible reality. So we're not trying to say, oh, well, what's the level 0 that's happening all the time? Like, no, what's the level 0 that could happen, but I could go all year long and it'll never happen. But we still need the level 0 in our system for just for a visual. When they look at it and they go, oh, yeah, that's level 0. Has anyone ever gotten level 0? Well, maybe you've got a bunch of students who are struggling with level 0s, but hopefully we don't have really any. So again, that's your situation. So let's just take this example that we have from generic classroom participation. And I'm hoping that you're stopping the recording at various times and working with your instrument right now. But this is the one out of the oven. So we look at all those. We go back from we take our content that we came up with, and we are going to drop it into our rubric format. And so we're gonna, So we're gonna take everything that we want and put it in the top level, and then we're gonna take the kind of the essential things and put it in the next level, and then we kind of take the basic things and we'll put it in the next level, and then we'll have the 0 level that basically says didn't do it, and or wasn't able to do the positive thing. And so, but once we've got this top level, it's not too hard. You just say, what's the stuff that's exceptional? Cut that out and then drop it down here. And then what's the stuff that is just basically And again, probably 4 levels is typical. So let's look at some 4 level examples. So here's 4 levels for labs. So this person came up with cooperation, attitude, effort, attention, and task. And again, same structure, but that was what they, this is probably good for middle school, high school, or really any grade. But again, enough words that we don't want to use this for very young kids, but we could use this for 5th grade and above, because at some point they're going to read it and we want them to read it. And that's part of what we're doing. We want them to actually not just like go, oh, how am I being assessed? Oh, by this thing? No, they're going to read it and go, what's the nature of having a good attitude? What's the nature of effort? What's the nature of high quality attention? What's the nature of high quality commitment to my task? So we're using it to understand the nature of these things. And every day I go, where am I? Oh, really, I'm doing this 2 level, and what can I do to be better? And that's where we want the students to be reflecting on where they are and how could I do better. And I'll tell you guys, for those of you who have experience with this, you know that students get better all the time. I had a student actually in this graduate class, it was about 4 years ago in this same class. He had never done this and he hadn't thought about doing it, but he had a class, his 6th period class was really a troubling class for him. And he did this for about 5 weeks at the end of the semester. And then he collected some data and he used the same rubric to assess his classes. And his classes that he didn't do this with, they were all kind of hovering around 2 and 3. And the class that he was doing this with, they all started at 1s and 2s. But by the end of the 5 weeks, they were really now at 3s and 4s because they had internalized this. So he was like, he didn't expect it. But he thought, wow, they're just different. And my experience is that eventually all students are getting to at least the 3, and the majority are getting to a consistent 4. So if you're doing this, whatever your words are that are in this 4 level, your students are going to embody those words within a short amount of time. So imagine a class where everybody in the class is embodying this top level. And I guess I would ask the question today in your class or the class that you observed, where would you put your students? Where would you say the average student is? And if they're a 2 today and you don't do this, there's a very good chance they're going to be a 2 at the end of the year. And that's frustrating. It's frustrating to you. It's frustrating to them as a learner that they're really not growing. But if you do this, the best chance is that they will be internalizing and manifesting that 4 level by the end of the year. And where is that for you? Now you're feeling like all my students are cooperating, they're trying, they're attending, they're committing to the quality of their task. Teaching is a completely different job now. The way they're thinking about their work is completely different. They're not thinking about completion, they're thinking about quality. So you're changing the way they think about their work. So here's one for a notebook, which is probably a good idea if you've got, I wouldn't encourage that right now for this because it's more of a product idea, but if you're going to give a notebook, you got to have a rubric for it. And we've got a lot of early childhood people and you guys have a lot of things you're assessing, but here's just something really simple. If I've got students who are, and I was just playing around with this, so the wording isn't great. And it's not really finished. So I wasn't trying to make something perfect, but I've had students in the past who've made really beautiful ones. And so if I've got 4-year-olds or 5-year-olds, I need really clear conceptual levels. And I have actually worked with that grade level and worked with this concept with that grade level. And what I find is that they can make a clear distinction between 4 and 3. I could ask a class, where would we put ourselves today as a class? And I used to get them saying, oh, we're 4 today. And they were right. And there's other days where I'd say, where would you guys put yourself? And they would go, well, maybe a 2 or a 3, and they were right. So why were they really clear about whether they were being a 4 level or a 3 or 2 level? Because they understood what the levels meant. And so we can define the categories any way we want. But in this case, it was something like these categories. But we do have a, you know, graphic images, colors, things like that. We're not talking about below problem. We're not talking about a colored card chart. We're not saying if you do this, you're not okay. That's not part of what we're talking about. There is a not okay, and that's built into the system. That's a level 0. And when you're not okay, something's got to happen, and you got to get that feedback, and probably a consequence. But we're not trying to publicly have students feel like they're either okay or below okay. And it's really different. And I hope that you guys are getting that. I don't want to beat that over the head too much, but so many teachers are using systems that basically start with okay and then they go down from there. And if you want to create worse behavior over the course of the year, do that. If you want to create better behavior over the course of the year, over time, over the long haul, then create quality distinctions about how to move from lesser levels of things like um, working with others, trying whatever your categories are. But we can also do things like, how am I feeling that day? And so those of you who are in the social emotional world, then there are really good systems for having students look up on the wall and go, how am I today? And you want them to be able to recognize their own feelings, their own levels of emotion. The Yale 4-quadrant one is really good. To me, that's fine. If you guys want to incorporate that or modify that, I would also incorporate something where it's more like levels of quality. But those things are really valuable because students can go, oh yeah, I'm a yellow today, I'm a red today, oh I'm a green today, I'm a blue today, and they can go, I got it in terms of where am I, and they go, okay, and recognition is 60 to 70% of improvement, um, and without recognition, then it's just us nagging them and bugging them. So there are a lot of different ways to go for early kids. There are tasks, and there's participation, and there is effort levels of work, and so there's lots of different ways you guys can approach it. But again, what's the nature of the thing you're working on in your project, and what's the skill that you want to encourage? And again, we're going to operationalize that skill. So, but like I said, the early childhood people sometimes come up with the most creative stuff. High school people. Probably hoping that you create something like this. Middle school, here's a great can't miss category. Early childhood people, something it's got to be, the words have almost got to be not, the words have got to almost be, if I'm on blue level 4, then it's not about reading the words, it's the whole concept around blue 4, and it's a whole concept around 3 green, and I understand it. So I can be 3 years old and I can still understand it. And it's because it's a concept. It's not reading the descriptors. When I'm in high school, I need to be able to read the descriptors and go, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Was it consistent? No, it wasn't. Okay. Yeah. And when you give them feedback, we're talking about the specific language. When I'm talking to little kids, then I've got a different way to talk to them about it. And it's a concept, but then now I've got the concept is real. Why is any concept real? Because we've talked over and over and over and over about the specifics, right? So we've made it real by talking through the specifics. So whatever my scale is, we talk about it all the time. And so they understand it in a deep cognitive level, but not because of the words that are on the chart as much as the words that we're using to describe it and the thinking that we're using to describe it. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's think about why we're doing this and how we would use it. So the point is growth, and the point is private self-reflection. So we want it to be private. We don't want it to be public and compared. As soon as we start comparing people, the whole thing goes into the toilet. Don't compare students to each other. It's got to be non-personal because we want them to do the personal work inside, but you're not personalizing it. You're not saying, "Oh, I'm so happy you were a 4 today." It's not. It's like, notice you were a 4 today. It's not personal. There's a million ways we want to show love, but we don't want to make them feel like, I'm happy when you get a 4 and I'm unhappy with you when you're not. That's not the point. The point is, think about life as a 4. Isn't it great? Isn't it great for you? And that's what we want them to revel in, that feeling of, I can get to a 4. I can be a 4 every day. I can choose a 4 every day. And that's where I want to be. I don't want, the teacher's happy with me because I got a 4. The teacher's unhappy with me because I didn't get a 4. The teacher compared me. I didn't get as good a score. As soon as I go to those comparison and the personalization, the whole thing goes from growth and motivation to feeling like I'm just part of the same world of the teacher wanting me to do certain stuff, manipulating me, comparing me to other people, me feeling inadequate, me feeling like, I hate systems because they always make me feel bad about myself. So you can see, you guys, just put yourself in that same situation. I can have students self-assess, and that's always a good process. Even if you're going to assess too, have the students self-assess. And if I've got a student with a real big problem, it's a great way to just go, okay, you self-assess every day. Let's talk about, in your contract for getting better at your whatever your issue is, you do an assessment every day, and I'll do one, and we'll talk about it. And it creates really clear language for that. Okay. If I'm using it with groups, I'm walking around using my scale language with my groups. I can give product grades along with my process grades, and I can debrief. And debriefing is going to be super powerful. So let's think about, if you don't do debriefing, I would say, of all the things I would first of all, I would do this. I would, I don't know which one I would not ever want to give up, but when we do an activity that's complicated, complex, and involves a lot of areas of investment, and we just stop, it doesn't really improve. And we could go back to the project-based learning idea, right? We need to have them reflect on their quality, and what are we going to do differently? What did we do? What did people do who were Fordas today? What did people do who created great work? What do people do really invested? What do people do? What does a great listener look like? All those kind of questions. When I'm asking all those questions in my head, I'm getting better and better and better. If I'm asking the question, oh, we were supposed to get done with this. Oh, I think we got done. Okay, good. It's 10:15. Okay, we're done. See you later. If that's the question I'm asking, then I didn't get better today. I did something, but I got about this much better. If I'm asking all those other questions, I'm getting better in leaps and bounds, and I mean leaps and bounds. So we're asking either questions from our rubric, we're asking questions, just simple questions like, what did you do that worked, and what would you do that didn't work? What would you try again tomorrow? All those questions, that debriefing after the activity is going to be powerful, but debriefing with the content of your rubric is immensely powerful. Again, I'll just go back to the combination of having my 16-year-olds doing that, and they became so sophisticated at thinking about what really was the nature of that 4, and to the point where they were like, we're making a distinction between 4 pluses and 5s, like that was where their heads got. And going back to the 5-year-olds I was teaching, they were really clear. How did we do today? And they're like, oh man, we did 4 today, because they felt it and they knew it. And why? Because we did this and this and this. And what are we gonna do again? Like what's a person in a class who you thought did a great job of this? So when we make it, again, we can bring the personal in. We can say, what's a personal example of a positive? We're not saying, I really like the way so-and-so did that, because all of a sudden now it just got contaminated and it got weird. But if I have them saying, who's someone in your group that did a great job of this? Now they're thinking about put-ups. They're thinking about the concrete examples. They're making it really operational in their mind. And it's really powerful. And every day it builds and builds and builds and gets better. So it's not me saying I like, or it's not me saying, oh, this group did good with this. I could say, you guys, let's look at group 4. What did they do today? And, let's group 4 talk about some of the things you guys did today. And so they can be proud, and we can all be proud of group 4. We should all be able to be proud of each other. But I'm not saying, oh, I really like the way group 4 worked today, because that's weird and that's comparison. And now I hate group 4. But we should be able to be proud of each other. But as soon as you say, I really like the way so-and-so did this, they stop being proud of that person and they start resenting that person. And so think about ways that you can have a group feeling like they're putting each other up. They're thinking about getting better at this stuff. They're thinking about adopting it for themselves. And it's magical, you guys. By the end of the year, pretty soon you get a whole group of kids who can't wait to go, so-and-so did this, so-and-so did this, so-and-so did this. And the energy of a bunch of kids trying to find ways to put each other up and identify really high quality things that each other are doing, that's a great climate versus, oh, we're done, 2 minutes to go. Oh, yeah, this is a good, teacher, thanks. Like that's a really different way to finish a day than everybody going, oh, so-and-so did this, so-and-so did this. And that's that energy of, we walked out of this class and it was a rock and roll concert of great stuff that we all did. And you go, well, that sounds kind of idealistic. Well, guys, it's reality if you just do this. And it might not be in 2 days, but after about 5 or 6 or 7 iterations, it will be. Who doesn't want to live in a world where they're putting each other up all the time and living in a world where they're getting complimented all the time versus, we just did this work and so did good. And I don't think I did very good. And it doesn't take that much on your part, you guys. It doesn't take it's not like you are putting some special effort into this. But in terms of grading it, there's don't worry about that, because that's another long conversation. If you want to do this in your class next year and you want to talk more about collecting information and putting grades on things and how you do that, then you and I can talk. But the rest of us, let's just think about creating a scale for now. Okay, so going back to our Canvas assignment, you're going to create a scale, you guys, and talk a little bit about how you're going to use it. So I hope that was useful today. That's it for the project. So your project is mostly going to be, again, if it's year long, it's your mapping, and you're going to say, maybe here's one place I would use a rubric for something. Maybe you're going to create more of them, but I want you to blow one out and make it here. If you're doing a unit, there's got to be something in your unit would be a complex task that you're going to assess, that you're going to make a rubric for. So the more ambitious, the better, you guys. All of us can go on the internet, find a topic, pull a rubric off, stick it in our project and go, oh, I got a rubric. And yeah, and sure, you can. And probably I'll have trouble knowing the difference whether you stole it from somebody else or made it yourself. But I can really tell when people's rubrics, they made them themselves and they look great and they fit, and they're proud of themselves. And when you make them yourself, then you can always make it. It's like if you made a cake, you can make cakes. But if you just keep buying cakes, you never know if you can make your own cake. Okay, folks. So that's pretty much it for tonight. And then I hope that, again, we're doing 2 things at once. We're doing our issue presentation feedback, and we're working on our projects. And the only last class we're going to do here with this is going to be the class on next level classroom function. And then we've got, by my calendar right now, well, whenever you're watching this, we're again, everything's due about May 15th, and let's get it all in. again, you guys, try your best to be ambitious and make it yourself. Don't just go, well, you know, I just got to get this thing done, and I'll just you do some before. Try to stretch yourself, and I'll appreciate that. And everybody's got, you know, a COVID break, you know, COVID benefit of the doubt, and no class meeting benefit of the doubt, and you've got lots of things working to get you in this semester. But try your best to be creative and ambitious, and let's create something that we're going to really like. So that's it, you guys. And I'm gonna pause recording, and I'll see you again. If you've got questions or you want to talk through your projects, just let's make an appointment and talk. You know, let's find a way, or show up on Thursdays. But look forward to connecting with anybody who wants some feedback, but I hope that was useful. So thanks, you guys, and I'll talk to you soon.